In the wake of the Arab Spring, President Bashar al-Assad's regime went head-to-head with several opposition forces that gained control over the land. The political instability has expanded into a civil war, displacing thousands of people from their daily lives and wreaking havoc in the nation. Thousands of people are now making the journey across the Mediterranean Sea in hopes of reaching the EU to find hope and prosperity. In response to the demand, controversy has exploded among the region, posing the pressing question, should the EU provide aid for Syrian refugees? I have diligently studied this topic for over a year. My research, in coalition with the claims of various European legal and political figures, concludes that it is not the EU's obligation to house the influx of refugees, as doing so would jeopardize the stability of Europe itself. Unemployment rates in social services are not strong enough to withstand the influx of refugees. The Huffington Post explains how in Sweden, nearly half of all foreign-born people ages 25 to 64 are unemployed. Since refugees enter countries often unemployed and uneducated, Sweden's 7.8% unemployment rate would rise exponentially. This effect would be felt all throughout Europe. Italy, Portugal, and Croatia all have unemployment rates over 11.5% that are predicted to rise. In fact, Greece, who faces the largest number of refugees, has an economic reality so dire that almost 1 in 4 people are unemployed. Accommodating the millions of people into such fragile economic systems would dilute resources, jobs, education, and opportunity, effects that would be detrimental to Europeans and Syrians alike. Britain's Prime Minister David Cameron explains, quote, I think the most important thing is to try to bring peace and stability to that part of the world. I do not think there is an answer that can be achieved simply by taking more and more refugees. He emphasizes the point that although taking in refugees may momentarily dissipate the chaos, ultimately there is no long-term solution that lies in simply housing them. Hungary's Prime Minister Viktor Orban declared that relying on the EU to fairly distribute refugees is, quote, mad, explaining we should help create stability in Syria rather than encourage a deadly escape and unsure fate by accepting refugees blindly. Understandably, it is hard to reject the Syrians. They are a group of fellow brothers and sisters in need, and many are justified in their compassion for the refugees. The burden of a global issue often weighs heavily on the mind of the Western world. The EU's commitment to the European people and nations is sanctioned as highest priority, and because providing asylum for the influx will jeopardize the stability and prosperity of the European people, social order, and political stability, it is their duty to first and foremost protect Europe. Although they may escape the Islamic State and Bashar al-Assad, migrants will face inferior lifestyles in Europe, mirroring some of the same struggles they faced in Syria. It is inevitable that they will adapt subpar socio-economic statuses that will most likely be institutionalized in European Syrians for years to come. Many cases in which a subgroup of people immigrate to a concentrated area, the inability to assimilate to culture, find social acceptance or economic prosperity, create poor conditions for the refugees. They are extremely likely to face a general stigma of resentment and opposition. Generations to come, the descendants of migrants will find themselves stuck in an inferior social status of hardships. After the mark of the Islamic State and al-Assad's regime vanish from the forefront of the Syrians' minds, they will be left with a mere subpar status in an opportunity-drained society. It is not plausible for the EU to manage the influx without it facing detrimental repercussions that would damage Europe. Although a generous utopian ideal, the reality of the situation is that the EU simply does not have the power or resources to effectively help while maintaining order and balance within their own countries.